Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So in today's video, as you can tell by the title, we will be talking about a potential monster El Nino that is going to be coming into this winter 2023-2024. Now, I know, the title is definitely a little alarming, but let's not get too carried away. I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube about the sensationalist people that are saying, this is going to bring such dire consequences. El Nino is nothing new. It's happened many times, and this is just another one of those cycles. Why I am calling it a monster is because it will be very strong, and that's undeniable. So the impacts could be a little unknown, as this could be one of the strongest, if not the strongest, El Ninos, and we are very confident in the fact that one will be occurring. So I'll show you what will be ongoing with this impact of this El Nino into the U.S. and southern Canada. If you're watching this from any other part of the world, South America, Africa, Asia, Europe, I unfortunately do not have any information for you, as I don't have any knowledge or information on those areas, and I've only historically done the U.S. and southern Canada, so I will only be expressing my opinions for those regions. Now, what is the El Nino? I'll get into that in just a minute. But first off, who even issues this? Well, it's issued by an agency called the Climate Prediction Center. It's a U.S. government agency. Obviously, they work in collaboration with other agencies across the world. But at least for the U.S., where I get this information from, this is by the government, NOAA, and you can see that El Nino conditions are observed currently. There is an El Nino advisory, meaning, well, there's a good probability that one will be coming, and you can see that greater than 90% chance that an El Nino will continue through the northern hemisphere winter. Continue because, yes, we are already in one. However, it is weak so far. It is nothing, you can see they're consistent with weak El Nino conditions. This isn't anything extraordinary by itself, but it will continue to intensify. And if you're wondering what the heck even is this, what even classifies as an El Nino, you may have also heard the term La Nina kind of thrown in with the term El Nino once in a while. Sorry about that, this thing is zooming forward. So basically, an El Nino is characterized by a positive O and I, so temperature difference greater than or equal to half a degree Celsius positive. La Nina is the exact opposite. We just exited a very long La Nina cycle of 3 years. There was on and off La Ninas for the past 3 years, so we haven't had an El Nino in a while. And right now, we are getting a pretty strong El Nino, meaning 1.5 degrees or stronger into the winter. And you can see that right now, hopefully you can make out this map, right? So these are global sea surface temperature departures in Celsius during the last 4 weeks. And notice that where it has gotten a lot warmer during this time frame from the late June into late July, it has been extraordinary across just off the coast of Peru and Ecuador. Obviously other regions as well, but the ENSO is this region, and whether or not this is 0.5 degrees higher or lower determines whether or not it's an El Nino or La Nina respectively. In this case, you can see they are warming quickly, so we are definitely in one of those El Nino phases. And just to show you, yeah, this is during the last 4 weeks, kind of a week by week. You can see that they have gotten progressively warmer and warmer. It's quickly intensifying. Sometimes these cycles take months to, warm even a tenth or 2/10 of a degree. So the fact that it's warming this quickly gives me more confidence that, well, this El Nino will be a very strong one, and the consequences may not be as certain, well, because we've never had such a strong one. And even if it does occur, even if it isn't the strongest one, it's only really happened once or twice in history where such a strong El Nino has occurred, so we don't have much evidence to go off of. Notice this is the Climate Prediction Center, again, that organization I was talking about. The probabilistic ENSO outlook, so El Nino, Southern Oscillation, that region from Ecuador, Peru, and through the Pacific Ocean into Asia. Notice the El Nino is favored through the northern hemisphere winter 2023-2024. Again, with chances exceeding 90%. Now, I've been using this exact graphic. They update this every second Thursday of each month. I've been using this graphic since 2016, so I've had many years of kind of watching this, and I know that when they say something like 90%, that's pretty much a guarantee. I would say even sometimes when they say 60 to 70, that's already a pretty good likelihood, let alone 90%, which is extraordinary. So you can see it may start weakening into more of a neutral. You can see the odds of a neutral, so going back to a non-anomaly water temperature does start increasing into March and April, but that is still too far out, and the El Nino chances far exceed any of those. So the winter, pretty much an El Nino, that is very likely. We've been already seeing this trend since last year. Even this last year, at this time of the year. So this isn't, something that changes too drastically, but it still can be very deceiving. Notice this is what the models predict. So they have these models that predict, sorry about that, they have models that predict the different anomalies of the water, right? So some obviously are a little bonkers. They show still a La Nina or a neutral. Some are showing some ridiculously strong El Nino. I don't think we'll get that strong necessarily, but you can see the average does show a 1.5 degree, that red line here, that thick one, 1.5 degrees or higher, which is indicative of, as they say here, a strong El Nino. And that is one group of models. Here's another one that's based off my history of using this source from the Climate Prediction Center. This one's usually a bit more accurate, and that dotted line has actually done a pretty darn good job historically of predicting what will come. So again, you could see right now we are in July already in a weak El Nino, but it is a El Nino nonetheless. And notice that this could be intensifying well into October, November, December, again approaching that 1.5, potentially exceeding it, which would be a moderate to strong El Nino. You can see some of these anomalies here, especially around October, November, December, are, that's a very, very strong water anomaly right there. So let's get going to some of these impacts, right? I explained a little bit of what the El Nino is, how it's characterized, who even grades this, what even determines what is an El Nino and La Nina. So let's now start talking about the impacts of this. So I'm sorry, I don't know why this computer is doing it. It's glitching a lot. So the historical La Nina and El Nino episodes, right? So this is what I use to go off of what we may be seeing this year. So this is a graph showing the, a monthly, year by year El Nino, La Nina neutral, and you can see, as I've been saying since 2020, when the pandemic was starting, we were pretty much already in the La Nina, and ever since then, for 3+ years, we've been in these on and off La Nina patterns. No El Nino since 2019, so it's been a while. And basically, what I did is went back to all the way to 1950. I clicked here, as you can see right here. You could go back all the way to 1950 and trace the historical data for this, and I found all El Ninos that had 1.5 or stronger anomalies, right? So strong El Ninos, and I basically went to a different website and plugged them into these analogs. So you can go back onto this website. It's basically these analogs, and it's for free. I'll link it in the description below. You can look at the different anomalies for different years, right? So as you can see, I found a bunch of years: 2015, 2009, 1997, 1991, 1982, 1972, 1965, and 1957. Those are years that have had strong El Ninos. Again, there's not that many. There are a few, so the database is decent, right? And I'm sure there's probably been more, obviously, in the early 20th century, but we don't have it. It only goes back to 1950. And you can see, on average, the surface air, you can see right here, composite anomaly, indicated cooler conditions across the south and west, and warmer across the south and east and much of the eastern United States. Now, for December, this isn't that strong of an anomaly. You can see 2 degrees and then 2 degrees in this favor. So this isn't really that particular. It doesn't really show that defined of a pattern, though definitely something that I think was more likely to play out. I think there will be warmer conditions across the east, potentially cooler across the southwest, but again, this is not necessarily giving us a forecast. It's giving us a background of what we may expect historically speaking. And again, each El Nino year is different. So this is the January time frame. So of all those same years, again, except this year, you can see since it's January, right? So the new year, now it's a year ahead: 2016, 2010, 1998, 1992, but it's the same old winter. And you can see January is where some of these anomalies really started kicking off, and where they were a lot more, basically a lot more defined. So notice that across the northern United States and the southern Canadian areas, we have a lot more warmth. And this is very characteristic of an El Nino. You pretty much have it flipped, where it's warmer towards the north compared to average, and cooler across the south compared to average. So don't misinterpret this and think that, oh, it will be colder across the south compared to the north. No, it won't. If your average in Minnesota is 30 degrees and you see 2 degrees above average, you'll see a month of 32. If you live across Alabama and your average is 60 and it's cooler by, say, even 5 degrees, then it's going to be 55. Still warmer, right? It's just based off averages. And you can see that it really favors the southern United States as being cooler. And you could attribute that to several different things. Maybe cloud cover, maybe cool air pooling there. That is kind of for a different video. What we're just trying to see is what were the impacts of this. And you can see pretty darn clearly, warmer across the north, cooler across the south. And this doesn't really change for February. Again, I apologize, it glitched right there. Notice for February, it intensifies, especially across the northwestern United States. Still though, northern United States, warmer, cooler across the southern. And some of these anomalies, especially you can see across Mexico there, into Texas, the south, pretty down far south, even further south than the United States border, it gets cool. So this obviously, if you put 2 and 2 together, would mean more snowfall probabilities for the southern United States compared to average, less snowfall for the northern United States. And again, you can see this is based off several years, and the fact that we're getting a 2-degree anomaly off of this many years is pretty incredible. So you can see that it's essentially kind of like a hamburger, right? We have one bun to the south where it's cooler, one in the middle where it's warmer, and then cooler again as you get towards the Arctic Circle. On average, again, this year it could be a weird year, right? Every El Nino, and same with the La Nina, they're all different. For example, last year was a La Nina. Typically, those bring drier conditions to the western United States. Anyone that lives across the west and is watching this video knows last year was anything but a dry year. It was actually record-breaking for the Sierra Nevadas in terms of the snowfall they got. And based off La Nina itself, you shouldn't be getting that. So again, this isn't something that is nailed in a coffin, right? El Nino is just a general trend maker, but it isn't what, is always set in stone, whatever it brings. So again, take this all with a grain of salt in any video you do see about El Ninos and the monster El Ninos on YouTube, because a lot of them really just go off of the hype. And again, I know I titled mine as well Monster El Nino, but you gotta give me a break. I gotta get the attention somehow, right? Okay, so now let's take a look at precipitation, right? So we looked at temperatures. Let's take a look at the precipitation. So let's go back to December, month by month, and then I'll show you, just like I did with the temperatures, the whole December through February anomaly. So notice surface precipitation rate, where it is the darker blues and purples, that is where it was wetter, and where it's yellow and orange, that's where it's drier. Notice for December, it's actually favoring a wetter pattern for the majority of the United States, including even the Great Lakes there, central United States, southern United States, a bit drier towards California. Again, the thing is that El Nino, for at least the North American continent, really seems to amplify its impacts that are actually traceable to a pattern during the winter months. During the fall, and you can see even December, this isn't typical of an El Nino. Usually El Nino brings drier conditions for the north, but in this case you can see it's kind of all over the place. Again, no real pattern. Once we get in towards January, you can see that we do see the pattern switch into more of a typical El Nino. Wetter towards the south, drier towards the Great Lakes, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, into Ontario, Quebec, and wetter towards the west. You can see some El Ninos would have precipitation further towards the south into Southern California that is wetter. Some bring it further towards the north and west. In general, though, the west is usually wetter with with an El Nino, and you can see that this is the case out of all these historical years. This is what January looked like. Now this is February. You can see the pattern continues. So January and February, usually whatever pattern ends up holding in those months stays within January, February, and most likely into March as well. You can see it's drier across the middle part of the country, especially around the Great Lakes region. Not terribly dry, but definitely drier. And you can see wetter towards the south and especially the southwest as you get towards later on in the year or into the winter season. So obviously, if you put 2 and 2 together, right, we did see that the south was going to see cooler temperatures favored compared to average during these months, but also wetter conditions. So obviously for some really southern areas like Florida, the Gulf Coast states, at least the sections of those states that hit the Gulf Coast, that could mean a wet, cold winter, right? But for others, this could mean an increase in ice storms as it gets cold enough for ice, maybe even snowstorms. We have seen some pretty nasty snowstorms across the southern United States during these times of the year. During the El Ninos and during this time of the year, February and January. I'll get into that in just a second. But you can see overall on the map, again, wetter along the coast of the east, the south, the west, and drier further inland. As we get towards now the overall picture, December through February, you can see that we have the west coast being mainly wetter. Again, so this is just nothing new. This is just all 3 months compiled. And you can see west coast mainly wetter, south and east wetter, and then the Midwest staying drier. So that's your typical strong El Nino impact. Again, this year may be different, but there's really no reason as of this point to believe that there will be something completely different, especially since this is the best we have to go off of. So this is what I'm going with. All right, so this is a little graphic that the National Weather Service and NOAA made during 2009, 2010. Now, you may be wondering why I have this. Well, because this pretty much puts precisely what I think may be happening across the North American continent this year, right? And it has a little bit more words compared to just showing you blank slides of colors, right? So this should be better, and it will be. So take a look at this. If you live across the Northwest, I do think you will be seeing milder conditions. That's pretty characteristic of an El Nino. Now, again, this yellow blob may be more expansive, maybe less expansive, maybe more anomalous. That depends on the year, and I can't, I wish I could, but I can't tell you that because I don't know. No one knows. Anyone that predicts they can is lying to you, and most people don't because most people aren't that, blatant lying. There aren't blatant liars like that. They're just guessing, and that's fair. That's pretty much what meteorology is in terms of this long range stuff. Whether or not meteorologist wants you to believe that. Want you to believe that. Okay, so notice across the southwest we do have heavy rain, mudslides. That is very characteristic. So again, for the west, southwest, you guys got a very good year in terms of precipitation last year. If you get another one this year, hopefully not too much rain so there isn't flooding, that could really solve a lot of these long-term drought issues, and it could be beneficial. Notice again across the south we do have that cold, as those slides demonstrated, as those anomalies that I put together demonstrated. Frequent winter storms, because again, once you get more activity from these low pressure systems, more moisture and more cold air, well, you're gonna inevitably end up with more snowstorms. Not all of them are gonna be snowstorms, but you're gonna get some. Notice across the Great Lakes that brown color, right, just kind of around Minneapolis, Detroit, that's drier and warmer, and that is again, I do think that's possible. Now you can see it also shows frequent cold December, early January across the plain state. That was characteristic to 2009, 2010. 2009, 2010 was a very odd year in terms of its impacts of an El Nino. It was a bit different from others. Everything else though, other than, again, this was one of the weird things, and there was one other region across the Mid-Atlantic. Everything else is what you typically see during an El Nino. Again, warmer towards the northeast as well. And don't be surprised, especially since you have a lot of cold air across the mid-south, for some of this to sneak into Florida and provide some damaging freezes. This happened in 2009, 2010. I would not be surprised whatsoever to see that this year again. I'm not saying it will, but if you live across Florida, pay special attention to this year's winter forecasts and just your daily outlooks, because if it were to occur in any of the years that we've had in the past 5, this year would be it. All right, and this is something that I've also noticed on my own. I was doing research about El Nino years, right, and what the impacts are for certain regions across the U.S. and Canada. And one region that continuously kept popping up in terms of the snowy impacts that it has from an El Nino is the Mid-Atlantic. You could see during the 2009-2010 winter, there was 60 to 90 inches of snow across the Mid-Atlantic, which, by the way, is extraordinary. I don't think that will happen this year, but it has happened before. In 2016, there was Winter Storm Jonas. If you live across the Mid-Atlantic, I say Winter Storm Jonas, you probably recognize what I'm talking about. That massive storm that dumped almost 30 inches of snow in New York City, crippled much of the Mid-Atlantic. That happened during an El Nino year. 2009, 2010 brought also many snowstorms there. So basically what I'm saying is, if you live across the Mid-Atlantic, the East Coast, New Jersey, the El Nino could actually be, if you're a snow lover, a pretty darn good sign of, of a pretty good winter. Again, each El Nino is different, but I want to emphasize, this is the best we have going off of, and it's almost, I look back at 1998, all these El Nino years, and there always seems to be a big snowstorm that sneaks in there. Now again, some winters are more extreme than others, like this one, but there are reasons that I have to believe that this year, I think something like this might come to fruition. So that is that. I wanted to show you that to give you a little better example of what may be going on with a typical El Nino year. Again, these are two snowstorms I wanted to bring up to kind of show you that Mid-Atlantic phenomena that happens during El Nino year. So this is the Winter Storm Jonas that happened in 2016 in late January. Some of these amounts were absolutely extraordinary. You could see across Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, Delaware, yeah, but a hot spot mainly across southern Pennsylvania. Some of these amounts were 30, 36. I think there's amounts that reported over 40 inches of snow. So, a crippling snowstorm, historic one. And you can see in 2010, we also saw several. This was just one of them. There were two, I think, or one in December that was even bigger, but you can see 20, 30 inches. So it really seems to favor these areas, the El Nino, these big Mid-Atlantic systems. So if you live across this area, Well, and you're a snow lover, I have some good news for you. Again, no guarantees, but it is looking favorable. Another thing that could be frequent during an El Nino year for the United States and southern Canada are ice storms. Now, this is just a picture of a ice storm that occurred in 1998 across southern Canada and the northern United States. It was crippling. It damaged forests. I think there's still areas you can see that are clearly visibly damaged from this ice storm even now after 20, 25 years. And it dropped up to 2.5, 3 inches of ice on some of these areas. Now, again, this could happen in any year, right? But 1998, 2015, 2016, 2009, 2010, all those years, you could look and do some individual research, have kind of been famous for either large mid-Atlantic snowstorms and nasty, nasty ice storms. So, again, if I'm going to make a forecast, I'm going to say I do believe there will be an increased amount of ice storms this year compared to your normal year. Now, where or how much or when? Forget about it. I can't do that. There's no way I can. I wish I could, but pretty much anywhere in the United States. With an El Nino year, conditions that are warmer, you could see ice storms as far north as, again, the Canadian border, like in 1998. But you could also see them across the further southern United States where it is cooler during an El Nino year. So pretty much anywhere it's possible. And ice storms, yeah, they're a lot more dangerous than just your regular snowstorm. They kill trees, power lines, and humans, unfortunately. So they're a lot more deadlier, and wherever they occur, people always make fun of the southern folks for not knowing how to drive when there's a big ice storm. But I'm sure a lot of northern folks don't have that much experience either in pure ice, as it often doesn't just pure ice up north. It's more of snow, which has a lot more traction than ice. All right. Regardless, though, that little tangent, I wanted to again kind of emphasize that there could be an increased chance for ice storms. And you can see this is a picture from the ice storm that occurred in 1998. There was up to 4 inches in some areas of upstate New York, just south of Montreal. Yeah, that's a crippling amount. Something that takes years to recover from. And you can see this is courtesy of Fox 6 News in Milwaukee. They put this little graphic together. So this is my final kind of little outlook. What I think will happen this year, if you were to really pin me down and say, okay, so what is this monster El Nino going to mean? This is preliminary, but what I do see is warmth / heat. There could be periods of pretty strong anomalies across the northern plains and northwestern United States in that red. Notice across the southwest, wet and snowy. Obviously, you're not going to have snow in Los Angeles, but you will have rain there. But across the mountains, where you typically see snow, there could be some very, very heavy amounts of snow, some atmospheric rivers, as they call it, across the west. That is definitely a very strong likelihood. Notice ice storms included a large area of the central United States and northeast. This is pretty much anywhere, though. I just wanted to make a region, but this whole map could be highlighted in pink. The threat for that, I think, is elevated anywhere. But typically, the mid-south there and into the Ohio Valley does see the nastiest ice storms. But again, as you saw in that graphic, 1998, there was one well north into southern Canada and the northeastern United States. And by the way, I don't include southern Canada in this because I don't have a map for it, but basically, if you live across, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, you could assume that you will also be in this warmer and kind of hotter pattern, drier as well. Same thing with the Northeast here, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, or Southeastern Canada, I should say, Northeastern United States, that is. Again, ice storm threats, I would say, are a lot more a stronger of a possibility. Cool / cold across the south again, so this could mean obviously just a cold, wet winter, or if you live further north across Texas, even northern Louisiana, Mississippi, this could mean a few nice, really big ice storms, maybe some nice snowstorms. I say nice. I'm a snow lover, so those 2 and 2 always go in hand. I love snow. For most people, though, it's not going to be that nice, but yeah, I think snowstorms and ice storms across the south this year are a lot more likely than any other given year. Wet across Florida, I mean, it could get cold, but I don't think it'll really get that cold where you'll have snow storms across Florida. Maybe a few instances of sleet, right? But wet, obviously, as I mentioned, some of this cold could definitely sneak into Florida and do some damage. So that is definitely something to watch for. And of course, the big snows. I think that's a trend that we've observed in El Nino years, and I think we'll continue seeing that. I think there will be some sort of a big snowstorm at one point or another during the winter. Maybe not across this whole region I've highlighted, but at least in some segment of this region, a snowstorm not just of a foot or two, a historic one. Where it's potentially 3 or 4. And anywhere in the gray, it's uncertain. Basically, anything could happen. There's just nothing really that defining of those regions. I could have definitely highlighted Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, northern Indiana, and Ohio in a drier, potentially warmer. But again, it's the the differences that differ from each El Nino year is just not enough for me to do that. And I found that these areas that I have highlighted had a lot more compelling evidence to go for them. So that is basically it, guys. You know, this may not be the most professional video you've seen about the El Nino and whatnot, but I really do believe that, you know, we will have an El Nino. It will be a strong one. The impacts will be strong, but we'll all survive. It's not the end of the world. It's just another one of these curveballs that Mother Nature is going to throw our way. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, consider subscribing. I'll catch you all in the next one. See ya. Bye.